Yes. Mr. Barclay was born in a little village called Lerwick in the Shetland Islands, which is north of Scotland. At the end of his schooling in 1840, he hired on to the Hudson Bay Company, who shipped him out here to Fort Vancouver. He arrives at Fort Vancouver in 1840, and his most average job was the head physician. And many times he had to help out not only the trappers and the traders, but also Native Americans. His other job, besides being a physician, was also the head of the Indian trade shop. And the Indian trade shop is where the Native Americans would come in, take their furs and trade with the Hudson Bay Company, and he'd be the one in charge of that, making sure that no one got cheated and the Native Americans were getting a square deal. He did everything he possibly could to help people. Many times the Native Americans broke out in measles epidemics, they broke out in all kinds of epidemics, but Mr. Barclay was always on the line trying to do his utmost to help the Native Americans. Unfortunately, that's what basically happened to the Native American population here in Oregon. They died of not only the many diseases that were brought here by the Europeans. In fact, Dr. McLaughlin one time writes in one of his letters stating that him and Mr. Barclay went and visited one of the Native American villages near the fort and said that he found a body stacked as high as he stood, and he stood 6'4". So that was a huge amount of devastation that Dr. McLaughlin and Mr. Barclay were up against. Mr. Barclay, after his retirement in 1849, he moved over here to Oregon City and built the house that we're sitting in today. His wife was Maria Pepin. She was the daughter of Pierre Pepin, who was one of the men that ran Fort Walla Walla, another Hudson Bay post. And they married and they had 6 kids. The Barclays, Mr. Barclay was very busy when he got to Oregon City. He was going to do his best to help develop Oregon City, and what he did is he became not only a physician here, but he became the coroner here, a life insurance salesman, superintendent of schools. He was a mayor. He was a multitude of different things when he lived here. Died in this house in around the 1880s. This was his office. This was actually the room we're in, was probably the main parlor, but we're not sure. This house had been modified so many times. That what you need or more?
Yeah, that's wonderful. Can you...
I don't know a whole lot about what he did there, and somebody at the fort would know more.
Yeah, right.
But I know what I've been doing now is translating his letters.
Yeah.
If you want to reach behind you there, I got one of his mother's letters.
Yeah, go ahead and talk about what you're doing.
Well, one of the things to not only expand and magnify my education of both Dr. McLaughlin and Mr. Barclay, because I am here in the house being a representative of them, I try to learn as much about them as I can. And both men did a multitude of writing. Dr. McLaughlin, we think, had over 1,000 letters that we are aware of. One of the things that I have done with Mr. Barclay is, here recently, I asked the question to myself, there's nothing out there on Mr. Barclay. And so I said, I wonder if there's any letters out there. So I did some research online, and I came up with 108 of Mr. Barclay's letters. And I don't know if you can see this, but this is actually a copy of one of Mr. Barclay's mother's letters. And as you can look at it, it's going in 2 different directions. In Scotland, they had paper shortages, and so they wrote down and then they wrote sideways to save paper. What I have done is take these 108 letters and transcribe them so us computerized people can read it. And this is what I'm coming up with. I mean, this letter here from his mother talks about how wonderful it was she had a new daughter-in-law after Mr. Barclay had married. And she says, what can I do to help you and your lovely wife? She never met the lady in her whole life, but she took her into her heart and said, what can I do to help you? And what can I do to be part of your life? Even though I'm 10,000 miles away, as she puts it, in Scotland. So this is the kind of feelings that you can get from Dr. McLaughlin's and Mr. Barclay's letters. You get that feeling of what they felt like, what they were doing, how compassionate they were, and what they were trying to do in their lives. It was that thing that sometimes I think we miss in our society today, compassion and love. They just really had a lot of it to give, even though they're